Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Evie Barrett, senior reporter at PRWeek UK, and today I'm joined by two special guests. We've got Sarah Hargrave, EMEA CEO at Porter Novelli, and Nina Pickup, executive sustainability and creative strategist. Welcome both. How are you doing?
Great. It's lovely to be here. We're here on the back of some entry judging, aren't we, Nina? So fresh off it, so I think full of inspiration. Yeah, and an absolute real privilege to be able to do it, I have to say.
Amazing. So Sarah and Nina, as you say, are here today as they're both shortlisting jurors for the PR Lions category at this year's Cannes Festival of Creativity, which is taking place in mid-June. We're going to be discussing how they found the judging process and what themes have emerged among the campaigns that have been entered this year. So let's kick off by discussing this pre-Cannes stage. How does it work being a shortlisting juror? Have you done it before, or how were you selected for it?
Nina, do you want to take that one first? This is my first jury shortlisting experience, and I found it brilliant. I don't know if it is yours as well, Nina.
Yeah, it's my first time being a shortlist juror, and it has been incredible. Really challenging, I have to say, because of the volume of submissions, but also it's a really important role. You've got to get it right. And I think as you're going along, you learn a lot. You kind of pick up a sort of methodology in trying to sort of work out which submissions should go into the shortlist. So it is rigorous. You know, I personally have been sort of going through the submissions and then going through them again and recalibrating them many, many times. And then right at the very end, I spent a day recalibrating again. So looking at my shortlist and making sure I was really happy with the shortlist and making sure the ones that were top of the shortlist were the ones that should be there. Luckily, I can say that I am happy with my shortlist now. So
I think it's that recalibration point, isn't it? I had to just see them all first before I even started to think about marks, even though slightly sort of psychologically I thought, oh, that might be really a winner there, or that might be quite good. And as you said, Nina, it's just going over it relentlessly. And at one point, I actually, just being completely transparent, was like, oh, hang on a sec. Let me remind myself what is a really, really good idea here, because you do get carried away, and there's lots of clever, creative people who've put together these videos and these narratives that are really compelling. And I think Tom, who's guiding us through all this, he said there are almost three lenses to look at them through. And I thought his lenses were really useful to me. Beyond, Nina, you're absolutely bang on with the insight. Is it a real problem addressing a real solution? And I thought that helped me really ground sometimes when I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. But actually, because he very rightly said that sometimes fakes can creep in, and they can, like, actually, this is a bit of a made up problem, but it's, you know, working for us. The second is earned right at the heart. So is it genuinely earned? And again, sometimes that became quite tricky, actually, just trying to unpick, oh, actually, what's driving this? And then finally, it might be a big idea, but where's the whole idea? So, you know, it might be big, but is it relevant to as many people as we need it to be? So I think those in my moments of, oh, gosh, I'm kind of like thinking this is great, but actually, is it really a PR end idea were really, really helpful.
Because it's a lot of campaigns that you're reviewing as well. How many was it, roughly?
Well, individually, we were given around about 300, weren't we? So
yeah, so it's a big task. I mean, how do you constitute a good idea, Nina? And has that kind of changed as you go through the process?
It sort of changed, or I got into a rhythm as I got through the process. And for me, the biggest thing, as we were just talking about, is insight. What is the insight? With some of the submissions, the insight wasn't 100% clear. So I was finding where the insight is really clear and really strong, what is the tension we're trying to solve? Usually the idea was strong as well. So I got into the rhythm of kind of summarising in a sentence, what's the challenge, what's the insight, and what's the idea? And if all three of those were strong, then we probably got a winning entry. But as I went through the submissions, what I thought was really good at the start, then I would come across other submissions that were a lot stronger. You know, luckily, it's quite sophisticated, the sort of online platform we're using, and we can go back and recalibrate our submissions as we go along.
And do you think there are any big overarching themes which have really kind of defined the work this year compared to other years?
I think for me, there was a lot of, there were a lot of ideas that reflect the backdrop, I guess, of society and just things that are happening in the world. So there were a lot of ones that either directly or indirectly were around sort of, the cost of living. There were lots around equality agenda was still there in terms of driving the equality agenda. I think, again, there was those sort of food wars that we see today came through. And there was fun and laughter again. But there wasn't as much around sustainability this year as there has been in previous years. There was a lot around voting and helping people vote as, I guess, reflects the backdrop of what we've been going through globally. So yeah, I'd say those were, and also, mobility, there's a lot of car manufacturers, applying their science, so to speak, to actually helping mobility in individuals and people. So there was some good stuff in there.
You just touched on this, but generally, I mean, there were a lot of cause-related submissions, but also submissions that have an impact on the world, PR beyond increasing revenue and brand equity, actually having impact on society. So there were some environmental submissions, but there was a lot of submissions with a really powerful social impact. There were also some submissions that weren't necessarily cause related, but the solutions actually had a positive impact on the audiences and their communities, which I found really powerful. Another thing I think came up was political submissions. So brands had actually taken a stance politically. So obviously there's kind of a debate as to whether brands should have kind of a voice in politics. But there was a couple, one in particular that I won't do the big reveal, but it did really impress me. And I think it impressed me because it was a small local brand and, which was supporting the local community, but it tackled it in a very interesting way, in a kind of humorous way. So it used humour to kind of take the edge off the kind of political statement that it was making. And I thought that was incredibly powerful. It was one of those solutions that made the hairs on the back of my kind of arms kind of stand up. I just thought it was absolutely incredible. And I guess the third thing that I was noticing, obviously, in the last few years, AI has taken front and centre stage. So no surprise for guessing that there are quite a few entries that made AI the kind of execution to the solution. It's kind of really interesting deciphering whether the impressive use of AI was good enough for a high score. But what I was trying to discover really is there a really strong idea behind the AI execution? So going back to what's the big idea? So yeah, the sort of looking really at the use of AI. If you took away the AI, would it be more of an average idea, really? So I was really interested to see that develop this year.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things to delve into there. I guess we can start with AI. How do you think that's really evolved over the last year or so? Is it quite prominent behind the scenes in the production stages of the campaigns, or are we seeing it more as a feature of the final product? And does it feel like less of a novelty, do you think?
I would say it's appearing all the way through now, as much as, helping identify and get to a starting point. Then equally, AI can be the enabler of the idea and actually can be the output and as part of that. So I think in many ways, it's probably fully integrated into a lot of these campaigns, but not necessarily called out as well in some ways. So I think you're right in that it's less sort of alien. I think looking through these entries, it's been used in really, really smart ways. And I think the outcomes are, to your point, Nina, really so impactful from a social standpoint that I think if people are sort of questioning AI, then it will really help them understand, okay, here's the power that it can bring. This is actually what it can do that is very, very positive for us.
And I think there were obviously some campaigns where AI was clearly, the really big, bold execution. But there are also quite a lot there's some really interesting product innovations with AI at the heart, and those products actually wouldn't exist if you took the AI away. So they were really, really interesting, and the impact of those innovations will be absolutely huge. And some of those, I have to say, made it into my final shortlist.
Interesting, yeah, because I think there's an assumption that, well, maybe a few years ago, AI would do things for us, maybe make us lazier. But I think if there are ways of kind of showing the potential that it can unlock, then yeah, that's where we're really going to see it start to win awards and things.
I think also I was noticing some agencies and brands were actually putting AI to the test, trying to teach it a few things. So that was an interesting take as well.
Nice. You mentioned obviously the political side of things as well with the most recent US election. That's obviously a big topic for brands. Trump's return to power has obviously shifted the way that businesses approach things like ESG and DE&I. I think there's an assumption that many brands are shying away, but do you think from the work that some are kind of confronting it head on and that we're seeing the effects of this? Or do you think that will maybe be further down the line? Because I appreciate some of these entries would have probably, the campaigns would have been produced pre-Trump back in power, so I guess it's an interesting time.
I think the one I mentioned earlier when I was talking about politics and brands' role in politics, there was one in particular that directly responds to Trump and some of the kind of actions that he's been taking. So yeah, one in particular has stood out and actually taken a stance, but like I said, did it in a humorous way. So not a non-aggressive way. And I think it was very successful as a result.
Would you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that, I think to your point, Eva, it's a little bit too early yet to sort of see, because a lot of these campaigns obviously were last year, but equally, I think those that have sort of got involved quite head on, I think, yeah, you're right, Nina, humour has been the key. But it'd be really, really interesting to see next year how brands have had to be even more innovative if they do so want to keep, this on their agenda and how they tackle it. So, yeah, I'll be really interested to see that.
I think, it's important to some brands in particular because their audiences are being affected by some of the policies that are going on over there. So, it will be interesting to see going forward. But as I said, one or two have really jumped out and already started having a voice, having an opinion.
And to that point with kind of humour, I think light-hearted campaigns and positivity were quite common last year. I mean, this year, obviously we've had a lot of big world events. Geopolitics is a big concern. Do you think that's carried through and that there are some more serious campaigns, or are brands still trying to keep things light where they can?
I think that there's a balance. There absolutely were a lot of serious issues in there, but I think the way brands sort of approached them were in two different ways. One was really quite overtly humorous, and another was just actually just a bit more joyful. Do you know what I mean? They were just bringing the joy to some of these, quite hard-hitting challenges that society has. And I think even though we saw it last year, we haven't really seen it much. So it was quite nice to see the humour coming through in a bit more powerful way, really, and not being apologetic around it. And I think a lot of people are looking for joy right now. So I think that's where they've probably, nailed it.
But having said that, though, there were some really hard-hitting campaigns as well that went for the jugular. So I think there was a balance. Some used humour, some went straight for the jugular and were very incredibly direct.
It's so magical, though, when there is a pure insight that's just beautiful and simple, and you're just like, oh, I feel relieved for the actual submission, because you're like, this is going to be plain. So this is beautiful. So it could write itself now. So I think it's, it's really interesting when you get those beautiful insights, as you were saying before, Nina, and that kind of like leads it. Sometimes I think, oh, it's going to be humorous. Then actually I'm like, oh my goodness, that came from nowhere. And actually I think I feel quite teary. So yes, I think I went through a huge emotional roller coaster throughout the whole journey.
Some brands, and I think these are the ones that actually really interest me, respond to global challenges, social issues, environmental issues, with innovation. So innovation ideas. So it's not about humour and it's not about hard hitting. It is about the facts and it's about a solution to solve that particular issue. And those are the ones that really impress me as well, because it's not just broadcast PR. It's, with intention to drive action behaviour change, with intention to have a positive impact. So those were really clever. And I think where innovation was central to the solution, I could really see the brands and the agencies working together and collaborating, not just on the PR and the PR tactic and techniques, but also the innovation that sat around it. So it really did feel like a partnership.
And do you think that kind of indicates where the industry is at with the whole concept of purpose now? Because I think last year we had two of the jurors, Kat Thomas and Fenella Gray, on the podcast, and they used the phrase purpose for purpose sake. They said that they'd seen that a few times. Do you think we've kind of moved away from that, or is that still the case sometimes?
I definitely felt a huge shift. There was none of that this time, really. It didn't feel, everything was very grounded, and actually even the language that was used, like I said, it didn't feel purpose for purpose sake. It felt very intentional, very strategic. The work felt very integrated. for those like ideas that had social impact, and the storytelling was really compelling, and the narratives were grounded in insights. So I think largely I felt they were pretty bang on.
I'd absolutely agree with that. I felt like that there wasn't an awful lot of purpose for purpose, because the topics that brands were choosing were extremely relevant to their DNA and to their audience. But also, I was making sure I was doing my research on those brands, and they were backed up by credible targets and commitments, by initiatives. They were taking action on the ground beyond this particular piece of PR, engagement and communication. They're doing it, and they're doing it very credibly.
Yeah. And that was a lovely, really good part of the judging, actually, wasn't it? On the specifically to social impact, it actually said, how does this tie back to your values? How is this in line with, so almost you couldn't fake it almost. You couldn't sort of pretend that this is our brand values. And of course we, do this save lives every day. And therefore that prevented the jump off and the disconnect and the tension between actually the reality and what they were proposing was the creative answer. So I think, again, if I was in any kind of doubt, I just referred back to that and I was like, yeah. And then, obviously it's very quick to unpick in today's digital world whether a brand is being transparent or not.
ChatGPT was used on a number of occasions just to double check.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. We've definitely seen more scrutiny of businesses and PR agencies over the last kind of year or so in terms of environmental work and greenwashing and things like that. Do you think that's really kind of, those fears have impacted the type of work that people are entering, wanting to make sure that it's really rigorous and backed up to avoid scrutiny?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we've got green claims legislation now, and clients are so fearful, quite rightly, and so aware of it, that absolutely I think it's influenced the solutions to the better. I think when all of the green claims legislation came in, there was a kind of school of thought that this is going to take all the creativity away from our solutions. But actually, I think the reverse has happened. It's made the solutions much more meaningful, much more grounded, much more impactful. Like I said, a lot of the solutions are demonstrating not just brilliant communications and engagement, but powerful action and an impact as a result of those campaigns.
Definitely. I think over the last few months, we've seen sort of authenticity become a real buzzword. And obviously that's what a lot of brands are looking for in their campaigns. Throughout this process, have you kind of had any thoughts on what it takes for a brand to be perceived as authentic by today's standards? How do you ensure that?
Going into these sessions, right, you have to be, a lot of the brands, you have to be careful in terms of no bias or what have you. But I think it's really easy for a brand to show up inauthentically if it goes against its tone of voice, if it's external facing, and consumers are really quick to pick up that jar. So I think a lot of brands that we work now are, just in terms of their whole comms framework, are looking at actually what does authenticity mean? Because I think that's the first step, is actually what do we mean by authentic? And I think the way that the award entries are created in the framework, you have to be your authentic self. And I think those ones that are a bit more lighthearted, that aren't as heavily tied to social impact. Again, the social impact has to be tied to your values or else to disconnect there. But the more sort of fun ones, I say, they'd be easily caught out if they didn't have that sort of sense of humour, if it wasn't their tonality. So I think, just frameworks, rigors, understanding what they are as brands will help them do that. And I didn't see, there were a couple that were slightly dubious in terms of the whole insight to delivery. It was a bit, I'm not sure there. But overall, they were still trying, authenticity. I didn't see a lot of inauthentic ones, so to speak.
And I think authenticity, particularly in the sustainability space, usually it's kind of an issue. But, the way brands and agencies are tackling those cause-related issues has massively improved. It's really important for kind of briefs that are responding to a sustainability or cause-related issue to be authentic. And they can only be authentic, Sarah's just said, if it's articulated and brought to life with the brand voice. And often a lot of these sustainability campaigns fall into kind of sustainability speak, the sort of corporate blah, blah, the kind of Blandsville. And so there's a lot less of that. I think, agencies and brands have really got their heads around, how to articulate themselves when campaigning around a particular issue without it sounding boring and trite and, using all the language that we all associate with sustainability. There's a lot less of that. In fact, I didn't see an awful lot of it at all. Brands are being much more creative in their expression of sustainability issues and the campaigning around them.
Yeah, well, that's promising. One thing which is always a big question for us, I suppose quite unsurprisingly, being a PR title, is kind of whether the winners of the PR Lions come from an idea that is produced by a PR agency, whether it's an ad agency, because am I right in thinking that you don't know which agencies have submitted these ideas and what type of agency it comes from?
That's correct. Yeah. So it's, we have no idea. It's just the idea in its purest form.
So how do you feel about work from an ad agency, maybe if it has an earned idea at the heart, winning a PR Lion? Is that a worthy winner, or would you rather see it come from a pure PR agency?
It doesn't really matter where the idea comes from. A brilliant idea, a brilliant PR campaign is a brilliant PR campaign. So yeah, absolutely.
It always is lovely to see if it comes from a, homegrown, should I say, PR and comms, as it did last year, because that does, I think, open eyes up to the fact that an idea can come from anywhere, and actually an earned idea can come from an earned agency. But having said that, and this comes back to the criteria of, is it a real problem? Is it earned at the heart? And it's the earned at the heart, because I must admit, actually, in looking at some of the entries, I was like, is that actually, where did that idea come from? Or not get too hung up on it, because it shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter where the idea came from. It's just being really sure that paid was amplifying earned, not earned amplifying paid, so to speak. And even then, again, it's not judging it because of that. It's just a great idea. So yeah, but it was really interesting. I actually got myself had to go back it'd be really interesting where that idea came from. But it's less about where it came from and actually, is it integrated? Is it really, has it got that talkability? Is it earned at the heart? And, is it authentic and all the rest of it? But again, you sort of, if the insight's there and when your stomach goes, it doesn't matter where it's from. It's sort of like, yeah, that's a great idea.
The point about earned versus paid, I kind of grapple with a few times, because there'd be a brilliant idea and the execution was mainly paid. And, so Tom's kind of briefing was all about, will it survive in the jungle or does it belong in the zoo? I.e., is it earned at the heart and is it a brilliant idea? There are a few that I just absolutely loved, but I had to mark them down because paid was the biggest mechanic. And it was just such a shame because it was a great idea. I don't know if you found that as well.
Yeah, no, I did. That's what I said. I was just had to double check. Oh, hang on a minute. I love this idea, but that's paid driven. And because then I also thought if other of the campaigns had that amount of paid behind them and their ideas were then on billboards as well, would I see? So I went through this whole having to apply that sort of level of paid to other ideas that maybe I hadn't classed as quite the same, because did they get that reach and were they a big idea? So that's why you have to keep going over and calibrating. And obviously, God love the agencies who are who craft the story that make it really hard to tell, actually, this, actually, and then when you look at it closely, like, okay, this is but again, a great idea is a great idea, but it's interesting, that whole paid and
I'll tell you what, I have found a couple of times an agency had come up with a brilliant idea, and then about a week later that idea had appeared somewhere else and it was another agency submission. So there were a couple of ideas that had doubled up. So then I had to try and find out who came up with that idea first, because, that happened a couple of times. Just going back to whose idea was it anyway,
No, I suppose the lines are so blurred these days that even kind of these integrated ideas, it's like what type of agency could it have come from in the first place? I mean, how likely do you think it is that PR agencies, I suppose UK PR agencies in particular, will have a good year after, as you say, Golin and Specsavers had a brilliant year last year? Do you think we might see something similar?
Who knows? I mean, there were some really, really good ones in there, I have to say. But because we ultimately don't see who the agencies are, we don't know, don't know all the PR agencies globally. So I would hate to even hesitate. But there were just some really powerful, strong ideas in there. So I do think whoever wins, it will be very, very worthy.
I guess, worth mentioning, we don't actually know each other's scoring either. It's so we don't know if all of our shortlists made it. I'm sure all of my shortlist hasn't made it, but that's what makes it interesting, because we're all from different backgrounds, different regions globally, and we all have a different perspective. Obviously, my focus and my kind of USP is sustainability. So what makes it so rich and interesting, you've got all these different viewpoints that are feeding into the kind of final shortlist. So it'll be really interesting to see what the final shortlist is.
And it'd be fascinating, because in my head I was almost playing devil's advocate at certain times, going, oh, but would you do this, So although we do it in sort of isolation, which is the best way because you can really, really focus on it. But I was sort of saying, but would you challenge that? And is that right? But it helped me sort of really, really get granular about how great is this idea and where's it come from? And is it salient? Is it a real problem? Is it earned at the heart? Does it have relevancy? So, but I think you're right, Nina. I'm really excited to see sort of the final lineup, so to speak.
Definitely. And are you both attending Cannes?
Yes, going this year. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Can't wait.
What are you looking forward to most?
We always talk about bringing the outside in and the importance of it and just being head up. So I think looking forward to most is connecting with old faces and new faces. I think it's always a great point to have some great conversations. I'm looking forward to being inspired by the work and more work, and equally just by what goes out, happens on the periphery. And learning and feeling energized myself, so I can come back to the agency and share some of those themes, some of those points of inspiration, some of the connections. So, yeah.
I'm looking forward to PR Day, which is on the Thursday, when all the live voting happens. I'm also really looking forward to hanging out in the sort of sustainability hub, which is, I believe, permanent fixture during the week. So really excited about that. I'm really looking forward to meeting the rest of the judging team in the PR section or category. And also looking forward to checking out some of the speakers. There's quite an amazing lineup this year.
Well, I'm excited to see these campaigns now and see what's managed to top the list. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, but thanks so much to Sarah and Nina for joining me. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it, please, if you could leave a review wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.